sumun la talibo Saba sanjani manso Usman ba Ibra jalbe jedi Izolu nidan Yo
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the conversation. We're back again this afternoon, like we always do, bring you young and prominent Gambians to talk about our national issues, get to meet each other. Ladies and gentlemen, we must have a conversation in order for us to move forward as a nation. I know we're very challenged today. It has been 21 years of oppression. And everybody's looking at how to really get us there, get rid of the dictatorship. That is what the conversation is about. Have Gambians talk about national issues, learn to have a decent conversation and a professional one to hopefully prepare ourselves so that when we get to that table and when we discuss national issues, the process will be a lot easier. This afternoon, we have somebody that Gambians are very familiar with. A prominent voice in the struggle. A brother, I call him a brother, in the name of Mr. Saul Bagi. Saul, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you, brother MD. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for accepting the invite to come to the conversation.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. I think I could probably just admittedly say that I'm on the opposite side of the equation because typically I would be the one that would invite folks and interview them, and I happen to be sitting on the hot seat this afternoon, but it's a pleasure to be on.
Indeed, indeed. It's an honor to have you here. I know that you have your own show on the Parental Network, to talk about education, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But like I always do with my guests, I'd like for you to take just a quick minute to introduce yourself to our listeners and to that person that doesn't really know who Mr. Saul Badjie is.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, Brother MB, again. I like using the acronym MB because it's easier, Momodou Krubally. Well, my name is Saul Badjie. I was born in Banjul. Grew up mostly in the Kombo Busura district area, which is behind Brikama, for those who are not familiar with the area. Raised by my grandfather, grew up with my uncle and auntie. I was raised by my grandfather for the most part, up until I was ready to go to middle school. And I went to Brikama Secondary School for a couple of years. In 1981, just around the time the coup d'etat was, 81 coup d'etat was taking place. And a couple of years sat to the exam with brothers like Papa Fal, who we are all familiar with, schoolmate. And then went over to Muslim high school and studied there for 5 years, graduated. I ended up working at the president's office for about 4.5 years, and then came over to the United States in 1993, October of 1993, and have been in the Michigan area ever since, almost 23 years come this October. Married, I have a wife, 3 kids. I have a 19-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 10-year-old daughter. My 2 daughters are 11 and 10. A 19-year-old is my son. Graduated from high school a couple of years ago, going to college. When I came to the United States, basically I, went to school, just like many of us would. When you come over here, usually sometimes it's either coming for the purpose of education, which in my case it was. Friends of mine were here going to college, and then I came in because cost of living has always been cheaper in Michigan if you want to compare that with other states. And so the demographics were also kind of convenient or suitable. As far as the weather, we're talking about a different thing. But the fact that the city of Detroit and the metro area is heavily populated with African Americans and Africans, that was kind of an opportunity for us. And so I settled down. worked mostly in the automotive industry for most of my time up until 2008, 2009, when I went back to school to get my master's. But I went to community college to back up a little bit. Did about 3 or 4 years. I've been a family member. Got married, brought my wife over in 95, 96, and then eventually graduated from community college, and then moved over to Wayne State University, where I pursued my bachelor's degree in OBA in public affairs. And then I did a co-major in international studies. At the time, I was still working at Volkswagen. Then, moved up a little bit in that company and enjoyed quite a bit. Grateful to God for the opportunity. Having worked with some of the top echelon there, like the CEO of Volkswagen and Audi, in the area of safety. And so up until 2008, things changed, and then I was laid off along with over 1,000 employees because they relocated to London, Virginia. Then I went back to pursue my master's degree at Walden University, and I obtained a master's in public administration, a specialization in international organizations, which was some of my favorites that I like, giving back. But I have been very active in my community here, serving in areas of education by default. As a matter of fact, I served as the Secretary of Education in the community here that we have, we call the the Gambian Michigan Association. Served well. We've done things such as in 2011 or 2009, when we had that flood in Gambia. We were able to raise a good amount of money with supplies to send to family members in our country. And so very active in our community here. Many people know me as a result. But in a nutshell, that's a little bit of my bio, to say the least.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Badjie. I definitely like to ask people that because I think sometimes Gambians are too humble to really, introduce themselves and really give us a good background, especially when it comes to their educational background. I know that you're currently a teacher, which we will talk about here in a quick second, and you also, you obviously, work with, minority and troubled kids. Something that obviously is in all of our communities and all of our families, especially as immigrants. In most cases, we do go through financial challenges, juggling that schedule, and in most cases, our kids sometimes do tend to fall behind. Although you will never go on social media or Facebook or anywhere and hear somebody saying that their kid is in trouble with school. Everybody always, expresses that positive side of what their kids are doing, which is just natural. But we'll get to that in a quick second here. You stated that you worked briefly at the president's office in the Gambia. That was under Sadauda, is that right?
Correct, yes. My parents, the majority of my parents were in the security field. My dad, my stepfather was a commander in the police force, worked in the Jawara regime for years and years, and then I had one of my uncles who was in the immigration department, Buba Sanyang, many would know him. He's no longer with the government as we speak. He's in the UK, but and then I had my own uncle from my mother's side who was also working in the police in the accounts office. So it just happened. As a matter of fact, because I graduated in high school in 1988, these opportunities became available where I ended up working in the president's office. I've never mentioned that, but we've gone past that for many years. I was a senior intelligence officer in that administration. Began as just a normal officer, and then ended up under the management of Pajalo and Keba Sise and Samaba, who passed away. All of them have passed away by now, but it was quite an experience working there. And it was a decent administration, it was a decent organization, but because there are so many things that are still private and secret, as a matter of fact, because I signed or swore to uphold secrecy, those were some of the things that we did. But in a nutshell, That organization back in the days is nowhere anywhere close in comparison to what we have with the now National Intelligence Agency, which back then was National Security Service.
Good. Well, thank you so much for that. I mean, it's always fascinating when you hear people say that they worked at the office of the president, definitely the highest office in the nation, and that you worked in this, security, the security officer there. Just in quickness, without having to obviously, reveal too much, some confidential information. What was your role there? What was your day like as a security officer under that regime? Just to give us an idea of, how that regime is compared to what we currently have.
Well, I mean, thank you for asking that question. I think it's always good at this juncture of the state of affairs in our country that sometimes it'll make sense for people who have held certain positions or worked in entities in the First Republic to kind of give an idea of what it was, as you asked the question. That intelligence agency, for those who know or don't know, was created as a result of the 1981 coup d'etat. And as a result, there was a recommendation that an intelligence agency be created that will be the oversight of collecting information or data and providing it to the government, just like it happens in other countries. You do have the FBI, for instance, in the United States. In Nigeria, you have what they used to call the SSS, which was an entity that provided intelligence information from all sectors, everywhere in the country. And every morning there would be the director of the intelligence agency would sit down with the president and just give him the state of affairs as far as the country goes. So what I did and many did, depending on what your role is. I mean, you would have people who would be engaged in surveillance exercise. Some would be just collecting information. But that intelligence agency, just like many, just aligned with what happens in the United States in many ways, because the senior personnel came over here and had some training after the 81 coup. So they came back and set up the structure that allowed the system to have a director, which is the general manager, as we might call it. And then you have deputy directors, one for the national affairs and one for the international affairs. That means international, so to speak, if you have information within the sub-region regarding uprisings, coup d'etats and stuff, we'd like to get that information to kind of dissect and find out how does that apply to us? What can we do to mitigate situations that are happening there? Why are people not happy with the government? What is the problem? And so that information becomes available from that intelligence setup, where it's provided to the president. And so my role was being part of that, gathering information from friends and people that you know. But it was all secretive. I mean, people, when I say that, people who didn't know who I was for the first time would begin to wonder and say, wow, never knew this guy worked in this setup before. But that's what it is. So, but collecting information and then you bring it and provide it to your senior personnel. Somebody goes and kind of cross-checks that information. They contact they contact what they call their agents, and those agents go back and cross-check that information to verify whether it's factual or not, and they bring that information in. I'll give you a good case in point because these things are long gone. There have been instances where you had some former government officials who were higher level thinking about maybe making a change in the government, trying to recruit some military personnel to overthrow the government or attempt a coup d'etat. That information would, funnel back to the intelligence agency, and then the intelligence agency will go back and re-interview the person who provided information, and then they'll use evidence, which is whatever they have as material. Maybe it could be recorded information. Maybe somebody overheard the information. You take and connect all those dots, and then you can bring all that information and then provide it to the director, and then They'll analyze the information and verify that it's factual. Then they go present it to the president. And then the president acts upon that information by saying, okay, let's go through the security agencies like the police. This person is wanted for questioning. They don't arrest people. They'll call you in and they'll question you because so far a crime hasn't been committed. They just know that you're in the process of doing something. In some cases, the intelligence agency will just follow the person and continue to find their modus operandi, learn about what they're doing, who they're talking to, and get more information and kind of keep a tab on it up until they find out that this is how they wanted to do it, to the extent that they are ready to carry out the attack or whatever they want to do. Then they would be arrested in the process. And that would be the evidence that proves that you were in the process of doing this. Today you've made the attempt of actually going through with that whatever it was you were planning. And so you'll be arrested and then prosecuted. But we've never had incidences where people are just being arrested out of the blue for just making a comment and all that. I mean, back in Georgia's time, people will come in and say whatever they want, but that didn't mean that you've committed a crime. There was a constitutional amendment that required us not to have the power to arrest anyone. Senior personnel would have that right. We never carried arms, never tortured anybody. We were the president's office, so we didn't have an office where we would keep people in anyway. The arrests were made by the criminal investigation unit. If we find out that somebody has done something that's less of a crime as far as being at the national level, then we will pass that information on to the CID. They will follow through with that. They'll make the arrest or they'll call that person for questioning. But typically less serious incidents that had no effect as far as national security were not under our radar. We didn't have to deal with that. We will pass that information to other agencies, and then they'll act upon those.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that in-depth explanation of your role back then. Obviously, as we know it now, once you even are suspected of anything, or, these days you don't even have to be suspected of anything as long as they know that you're not a supporter of the regime. You're automatically arrested, tortured, and you're lucky if you just get thrown in jail. So just quickly to touch on this before we go into the main, conversation, because this is obviously a subject of interest. So here you are, just graduated in 81. 88. From 81 to 94, obviously the coup d'etat happened. Here you are in the security as a security officer at the president's office. Between the 1981 coup d'etat and the Jammeh coup d'etat, as we get to know it there, was there any real threat, just in a quickness for the sake of time, was there any real threat that you all did find, and how was it, stopped, or did you guys know about this 1994 coup d'etat that happened? Were you still there at that time?
Yeah, I was in the United States for about a year, not close to a year before the coup d'etat took place, because it happened in 94. So I came over in August of 1993. I flew out, came to the UK, and then stayed in New York, came to New York and stayed there for a couple of months, then moved over to Detroit. But yeah, the coup d'etat happened after I had left. But to answer your question, absolutely yes. We've had numerous incidences, not the least Koko Samba Sanyang. So many reports and information, raw intelligence that actually pointed directly at activity that was in attempting to overthrow the Jawara regime. So I can name you so many of them, although, to keep some of those things secret. But, we've had incidences where a former prime minister was talking to senior military personnel about change of government. And that information filters down to the security agency in our department. Then we'll follow through with those. I mean, there's so many things that we do, but we had to make sure that those were authorized. Either we go to the court to get clearance to be able to proceed and do whatever we have to do. But the Constitution gave us the right to actually investigate. We don't arrest people, but we can go and dig into that. We will follow people. We will contact our agents. secret agents, people that they're funded. The government provides funding for you to have somebody that you trust that can provide you information about a particular person because they're close to somebody who knows that person, and just, casually gather information. It's not some intimidation or maybe try to get somebody in trouble. You could be sitting down drinking attire, and then somebody starts making a statement about, somebody is talking about overthrowing the government. Oh, yeah, what is that person talking about? Just casually, like a conversation between you and a friend. And then at the end of the day, you come back and provide that information to whoever the security agent is that's your contact. And that person reports that information to the director in your group. And then the director takes that up to the higher end, and then they'll look into it, and then they'll come back and say, okay, we want you to follow up with this and find out if this is actually something that they're doing. But, yes, we've had so many incidences. One caveat about the intelligence agency is usually when there's quiet, that's when our directors always tell us that we need to start digging in. If there's some quiet in town, there's nothing going on, then that means something must be going on. But those were things that we've worked on, to say the least.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So, just one last question about this matter here before we really move on to, and like I said, for the sake of time, we'll just go ahead and, get to the point on our answers. Now, Mr. Badjie.
Yes.
As someone who has traveled, worked in the security, as a security officer at the president's office, and as someone who understands international politics now and how certain other governments work, why do you think that in Africa especially, we always resort to coup d'etats rather than working on that political agenda to make change? And what do you think needs to be done to change the mind frame from the barrel of the gun to the to voting, to change our government so that we can at least get some civility back? Because now most of our leaders come into power, the first thing they think about, obviously, unlike Senegal where, the structures are pretty well built over there, they're worried about surrounding themselves because of the fact that, like you said, there's always continuous threat of, oppositions, members of the military always trying to take the government. Why is that? And what do you think needs to be done for us to really educate our people to understand that, listen, it's okay not to agree with the government, but there is a 5-year plan in our case where you can really prepare and challenge the government, and there's other avenues that you can challenge the government rather than just taking up a gun and changing, these regimes by force and getting into a dictatorship.
Well, thank you for asking that question. I think many, like you and I, would actually be able to say you can point at so many other issues. But I think, in my opinion, and perhaps looking at data from my experience having worked in that entity at the president's office, is usually you have these forceful changes of government as a result of maybe either that person who is sitting on the throne used the same methodology to become the leader of the country, which is there was no electoral process. People didn't have a voice. You took over the government and you said, we're taking over for the good of the country. And you and I know that in many cases, it doesn't turn out to be what it is that they've advocated or promised the public that they were going to, the citizens that they were going to accomplish. So there's usually what we would see as corruption. You may change the government with the hope that you're going to do better, and in many ways it doesn't happen. Now, you can use the case of Thomas Sankara as an example, or maybe, the former Ghanaian president who was there. Many people would say the way he ruled that country was brutal and many things, but I think now he sits back and he'll talk about some of the great things that he's done. But quickly to answer your question, if you came and you forcefully overthrew a government and you sat there for years and years and years and people are not seeing tangible results as far as the change in their livelihood, then that actually festers into the political process being pointed as unfair. In the case of Gambia, you and I know, and in many countries where you have brutal governments, the opposition parties are marginalized. The public is marginalized. The first thing they do is they surround themselves with an apparatus of security agencies that do the kind of things that are happening in Gambia. If you're an enemy of the state, then you will be either persecuted or maybe you will be thrown in jail. In many cases, they'll harass you to the extent that, life becomes unbearable for you, then you have to exit or run out of the country. But these are some of the things that make it difficult. But if I look at it positively, assuming a government change has occurred, either by default to overthrow or whatever, where the person says, I'm taking over because we don't like what's going on with the government. And then you say, temporarily, and we're going to make sure we hold our feet. We were here for 7 months, 1 year. But we want the political parties to get their acts together, let them vote. Whoever wins will be the president. We're in the military. We'll go back to the barracks and just live our lives based on what the Constitution has mandated us to do. Then we wouldn't be having these problems. I don't know if I've answered your question or not.
Yeah. No, it gives a clear understanding. It's just one of those things that sometimes you can't help but think, why is it that we always resort to, the violent route, which brings the instability, the dictatorship, it breeds dictatorship, and the simple fact that having that fear at the back of our leaders doesn't allow them to really, work as they're supposed to be and answer to the people. Half of the time they're worried about, protecting their positions, protecting their lives, and I think it's just the next thing that we, especially young Africans and especially Gambians, also need to start talking about for people to really understand, the importance of having the dialogue, which is what this conversation is about. And if you see today, there's a serious political standoff in our country in the fact that you've got a senior politician arrested, and you've got the other ones still, going about life as normal, just writing. And if that were in the United States, it would have been a total different thing. But thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and switch over to the education part. Out of the reason why I really brought you to the conversation here, I know that you're a teacher right now. It's one of those things that I wanted to talk about. I'm a parent, and recently I had Dr. Jammeh visit me, and I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old daughter. And for the first time, we started having a conversation about, have you started looking at colleges? You're almost there. You're almost late with your senior one, but you need to start the process. And that kind of, woke me up a little bit, and it's something that many of us don't think about. But before we get to that point, you have a radio show on the Facet Network. What motivated you, and why do you think that show is important?
Thank you very much for asking that question. I'll back up a little bit quickly. During the period when having worked for Volkswagen, I got laid off. I've always had, like I said, I have always participated in community affairs here. I serve my community. People have naming ceremonies. They'll call me, Saul, we want you to come in and organize this. We want you to do this. So I was prevalent in helping my community. Sometimes I have been reluctant, but people will ask me. If we had a funeral and then they needed somebody to speak on behalf of the family of the deceased, and they'll call me. The imam would be there to do things that he's supposed to do, but usually he'll also call upon me and say, can you communicate this information to our people, especially our African American community, people who can't speak our language. So those were some of the what you would call a need that was not filled, that I feel. And so between the years of 2009, 2010 to 11, I got involved in small business ventures with partners that, were working. And so in that process, then I started approaching my community, telling them about opportunities. Do not think about working, 40 hours a week. Think about other avenues. Try to do something that you can earn a living with. Because you would be at the mercy of your employer, just like I was. That when they lay you off, you have to start from scratch. Think about, think about backup plans. What can I do for myself? expose yourself and kind of interact with people who are knowledgeable, people who are successful in business. Maybe you'd learn a thing or two. And so when I realized that there was, a lot of our Senegalese families, communities here, nothing actually clicked up until I started in the teaching field. And then I got approached by a lady who's Senegalese who I know. They've known me for years and years and years. As soon as they knew that I was teaching, the first thing she said to me was, I want you to help my kids. And I said, wow, that's not something I thought about, but maybe I'll think about that. Next thing you know, I start tutoring her kids, and I have people asking me for help. And then I started making these and a daily occurrence. I would go do my teaching, get off from work, and I'll be driving around town just going into every household. And in the past 4.5 years, I have tutored close to 70 children, 70 students in our neighborhood here, many of whom have lifted, 99% of all of those kids have lifted their grades from 1 grade level to 3 grade levels above. Because they were struggling. So that was the motivation factor behind the whole theme. And I approached Fatu one time and I said, listen, we need to have this conversation. My Gambian brothers usually are just the people who take a back seat, but the Senegalese community is utilizing service that I'm not charging them a lot of money. It's very minuscule if you compare it to it, but I wanted to just feel that need. Let those kids be successful. Perhaps tomorrow they'll be able to do the same thing I'm doing and help the people in their community by tutoring young ones. And that was what motivated me. But quickly, what happened between 2009 and to this day was, I got approached by Wayne State University to go in and sitting as an alumni, to sit in the process of selecting high-achieving high school graduates who were applying to college for scholarship offers. And that was one of the eye-openers that showed me that we are way behind the curve. We don't know what's going on. If I had known that, that was just about a couple of years before my son graduated in high school, and I really started backtracking and ratcheting up my efforts to help him out, because that's information I never got to know. I went to that school, graduated, but I didn't know the process. So here it is, the university is actually inviting thousands of students on what they call a Scholars Day event, and it happens twice in a year, one in November and another one in February, where they call upon the alumni who've graduated and successful to come in and volunteer their time and interview these bright students who would be offered scholarships from $8,000 sometimes to $48,000 per year to attend the university in the liberal arts college or any other field that they intend to take. And these were the things that I figured, okay, my community is not exposed to this information. Somebody needs to start making narrative, telling them about these things. And then you couple that up with my sons having graduated from high school. In those 2 years, I was able to look into all of that information. Then you add the equation of teaching. I have teachers who have kids who are going to college. Some have graduated, some are getting ready to go. And then I would hear them telling me about things, for instance. November is a good month for you to put in your FAFSA application. November 10th is the deadline. By the way, as your son or your child starts getting into 8th, 9th grade, you need to prepare them for the ACT exam, the SAT exams. You don't just let them take the test. Pay some money, have somebody tutor them. And they have people who offer these programs that actually teach them in the summer. Prepare them so when they take the ACT, they'll have a good score. And by the way, if they fail the ACT or don't get the number, the amount, the grade that they want, or maybe the points that they want for admission to college, don't lose courage. That happens all the time. They can take it as many times as they want. As long as they're doing better, the schools are always going to look at the highest grade. And then they'll offer them some kind of scholarship. So these were things that motivated me to actually start the conversation of taking it up in the airwaves and kind of educating our community.
Thank you so much. I think what we need to do is, you probably do this already, but this is something that you should probably really look into, really, having on your program to just, start talking about these things. Because for me, like I said, obviously when I came over here, I had to go through my own, research in trying to enroll myself into school. And to be very honest, I really never thought about the process. To me, it was like once my son graduates, we're going to apply for colleges. And, I knew at some point I was going to do some research, but just having that conversation with Dr. Jaide just kind of gave me a much better idea of, how to move forward. But let's backtrack here for a quick second here because we're talking about high school. You indicated that a Senegalese family approached you, which clearly indicates Gambians in most cases don't want to discuss these things. If our kids are failing, we like to keep it as a secret until it gets late, and in most cases we don't reach out for help. Now let's backtrack for a second, and I want you to just quickly, if we can make this like short answers. When you have a child, obviously we know that there's that September cutoff, because just to educate our people. That September cutoff where if your child is born before September, they can attend school by the time they turn, 4. But if they do, if it's after September, then they're a year late. Can you kind of just explain that just so that that young family that is preparing, their child right now to just understand those dates, because that's very important. I fell into that. My son, October 2nd child, had to wait a whole year to enroll into school.
I'll tell you what, Brother Andy. The dates that we just mentioned, they don't count. Trust me. People should actually, stay away from that stigmatization that if my child is a year late, then that's, it's going to make things complicated. No. There's a reason why the United States government have those there. I want people to remember this and understand it. Sama buga mbokk ay déggal sa doom su fekkee ne mu ngi am ñeneenti at September jot amagut juróom pour mu war a dugg school, which is very important that we put our kids into going into pre-K. I say this in my program all the time. Do not wait and say, I can't afford it or maybe it's too expensive. There is funding out there in every state where if a parent can't afford to pay for their child to go to pre-K, the government may provide some stipend. They will provide some funding to help you pay for it. But you should cough up the balance of it and do the best you can to put that kid to go in and learn those fundamental skills. Okay, those developmental.
Most of them you can get them for free too in most states too. So just that kindergarten, there's a lot of help out there.
Absolutely, but a lot of our families don't know that. And you have to pay money, which I did for my kids. But I had help from the state. Most of it, depending on your income. If you can afford it, pay for your child from the age of 3, 4. Let them go in and get these skills, because this is where we fall behind, Brother NB. This is where we fall behind as a community. That's a very important thing. Sa doom bi daal bu amee ñeneenti at bul worry. Su fekkee ne September jot na amagut juróomi at ñu ne la dafa xaar 1 year yóbbu ko mu dem join kindergarten or pre-K. Na dem pre-K rek su at bi jotee pour mu war a dugg first grade or kindergarten nga enroll ko. We have right now in my school, we have kindergarten kids who are at different age groups. Because of what you just mentioned. They may fall, the date of birth may fall at different dates in September where they wouldn't qualify, they'll wait 1 more year. But guess what? That gives that child the opportunity to go to pre-K and prepare themselves so when they come to kindergarten or first grade, they're better prepared. They will be able to fluently explain and read and articulate information. And our challenge, my brother, is the fact that we speak a different language, and I'll talk about this a little bit. When everything we talk about, like you and I, we're thinking, like Dr. Jang said in one of my program a couple of weekends ago, we're thinking from the perspective of the language that we speak. And so that's a big challenge. For you to use that information and turn it around from your perspective of whatever language you speak and try to explain it in English is complicated. So we need to make sure that we enroll those kids early and put them in. But to answer your point, that shouldn't be an issue. We have kids who are held back in high school. I do that with like I said, with the Senegalese sister and many of them. When they bring their kids from Senegal, they call me and they say, look, I have my child. I can't tell you how many families, and I'm grateful, Brother MB. I feel blessed every time. Sometimes my wife would say, boy, you're doing this for all of these kids. Many of these kids that you work with are all straight-A students. You're tutoring them. You're helping them. Just don't forget your kids. And I said, my kids will be fine. I'll make sure I provide them the time to help them out. But these kids would, once they get these fundamentals, they excel exponentially. But as a result of the fact that they're opening up dañoo ñëw ñu wax la ne man dama am problème suma doom, I need help. Maybe the child needs help with whatever area. You go home, you spend time with this kid, you find out what their difficulties are, and you work with them. Not only do you tutor them, you mentor these kids so they become stronger. They can withstand pressure from the peers in school. Like they pick on them. You know this because you have kids. They'll pick on them. They'll call them all kinds of names. I try to train them to ignore all of that and focus on their education. And many who have actually, not fallen into that trap had been successful. I have a college student who I worked with 3-4 years ago, the same age group with my son, and I tutored her and helped her. She came here from Senegal, didn't speak one English language, couldn't speak one word, came in, went to a high school with her brother. I held them back a year below. So this happens because I needed them to be prepared. Instead of her going to 12th grade, I put her into 11th grade. She finished that year, struggled for a couple of semesters, and next thing you know, she excelled, started becoming a straight-A student, went into 12th grade, graduated, went to Wayne State with a full scholarship, and this past semester, she just texted me her grades. She has all straight A's, my brother. And these are the things that happen. So it's not too late. For some the fundamentals. What happens is at that time, late, try and get all the resources and the help you can from whoever it is, and focus and zone in on helping that kid. They'll succeed. But the fundamentals, which is if you have a kid who's young, so making at 4 years, 5 years, don't worry about the cutoff date. Just hold on to them, but make sure you put them in some kind of school setting where they get to socialize with the other kids, but also learn the language skills and the fundamentals.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Badjie. I know that when it comes to education, we can spend hours and hours and hours, and I hope somebody like you can really think about something like a tutorial, either a voice recording where you can really walk parents, from the time their child turns that to starting to prepare them to the point of education would be very, very important, because I think we do miss out on a whole lot. I think obviously many of us are getting to understand the process a lot, but there's younger Gambians coming in, younger families that really, a majority of the people, even people from this country, sometimes don't understand some of the benefits out there and what they need to do. But like I said, we could sit here hours talk about that. Now, just for the benefit of time. We've talked about this kindergarten thing, how to get started in, school, how, when they fall behind, to make sure that you seek help and the whole process. Now, I just want you to talk about the importance of parents getting involved into their kids' lives at school activities. I do that all the time, be a chaperone, go over there talking to the teachers, getting the teachers' email addresses. The importance of that. And obviously for the student themselves, once they start getting to that 11th, 12th grade, the importance of, community service and getting connected with, getting some kind of a network started out there. If you can just quickly, just touch on that, just so that our people can have a better understanding.
Yeah, the issue of the parents getting involved in their child's education and communicating and keeping that line open between them and the school administration. If you don't have those channels open, your child would be bound to failure. There's always this potential of children failing. And you know what supports that? The Harvard University has done lots of research, and they've found all of these. I've talked about it in my program, where they did some experimental research and came up with the scheme that for any school to be successful in teaching the children, it has to involve the administration of the school, the parents, the community, the government, and the NGO sector. These key pillars have to be engaged in. And how are they engaged in? Just like what we just said. A parent is willing to always go into the school settings every single time, or every time they have an opportunity, at least once, twice every month, The more you go to your school, your child's school, the better it is for the child. Not only, especially for kids who are coming from Africa, or maybe a child who's never been exposed to that environment. They feel comfortable seeing their parent coming to the school all the time and communicating with their teachers. Then the teachers have this confidence that, oh, wow, this parent is really particular about their child's education. Well, guess what happens? They'll open up. They'll be providing you with information, raw material that you need to know. They'll tell you stuff ahead of time. The exams are coming up for this, so and so. This is what your child needs to do. I can't tell you how many times, MB, that I have had a parent, I have so many of them, who are engaged in their child's education from the get-go that become successful. Let me share a story of a co-worker of mine. And we'll talk about the challenges that affect our children when it comes to disability issues. I think that's very important. She has a son who had a little bit of a disability issue. He had a daughter who's older. The daughter is the same age with my son. She graduated and is going to a university, had a scholarship. But you know what happened? Her mother was a teacher. She retired, and then she just had this feeling of getting involved in the teaching field. She was not a teacher. She still is not a teacher. She works with me in the same group. She works with what they call the RTI. They work with students who are very low, and we try to uplift them and teach them so they can get their grades better and understand language skills. She had a son, and she stayed engaged in that school to the extent that her son today, he's graduating this year. He had a 33 out of a possible 37 of the ACT score. And he has been offered a scholarship at Princeton University. The kid is not smarter than any of our children. I can tell you that right now. But what happened was she had access to information, and she was engaged in her child's education from the get-go. And those foundations were set in stone. That kid in 4th grade, she was telling me, was getting all of her grades so well that she had a kid that was sitting next to him. And this kid was always grading the papers wrong, even though he had them all right. And at one point in time, the teacher called mom and said, look, when you come to the school today, come see me. And mom said she came and saw the teacher. Teacher said, I don't know what's going on with your son, but her grades are actually not doing so well. I don't know why. And I don't see any reason why he would fail this test. Mom goes home and talks to the son, and son said, Mom, I had all of that right. There's no question that at my paper I would have 100% out of that. Well, looking into it, they found out that the kid that sits next to him was jealous that this kid was doing so well in school, so he decided to grade his answers wrong, even though they were right. They made a plan. One of the homeworks was taken home. He did the homework, brought it into the school. The teacher made a copy of that homework, and then students do grade papers. They switch papers and grade them in the classroom. Makes it easier for the teacher, but they also know the process. And so this time around, the kid graded the paper wrong. The kid failed. And then that's how they found out. When they confronted the student and asked him, why are you doing this to this kid? And he said, you know what, I am tired of him getting everything right all the time. That speaks volume. That means the kid knows that they're not getting the kind of help that they need, which this other young man is getting. Today, this kid is ready to go to Princeton. He's not smarter than your kid or my kid, but there was an access to information. So in a nutshell, when the government gets involved and they provide the funding, and they make sure that the material that is needed for school setting is available. And then the administration is ready to support because they have goals that they have to meet by state standards. And then you have the NGO set to fill in the void because teachers may not have all the material they need. And they'll provide things like tutoring, like you and I are talking about. And then the parents get involved in volunteering. Every time if something happens, go give them your time and say, I want to volunteer. Not only does that allow you to connect with the teachers, but it gives you access to information like we just talked about.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Badjie. This is probably one of the best conversations thus far, talking about educational, how to help our young families prepare. This is something that I'll be focusing to bring young Gambians here that have succeeded in the educational field. We will bring the likes of Musa Mane's story from the primary schools of Bansang Primary School to Seton Hall University. I think this is a very important part because we're having that. In my case, obviously, second generation of Gambians that are definitely bound to do well, but only if we give them the necessary support that they do need. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Saul Bagi, a Master in Public Administration, current teacher, and works with minority kids and troubled kids in Detroit. Mr. Badjie, thank you so much. You know, that was very good information. I would definitely like to have just a session with you. This is something that you should probably just even focus. I know it's very simple information out there, but believe me, you know our people are shy to ask. They're shy to just, go search for this information. We don't have the time. We're busy running a home in America, running a home in the Gambia, too many responsibilities. And I think some of us, obviously this is our responsibility to make sure we provide this information. You're doing a fantastic job on your, Fatu Network show that obviously, and I hope people will take the time to listen to that. That normally happens on Saturdays. Is that correct?
Correct. The program comes on Saturdays at 11 o'clock our Eastern Standard Time, which is local time here. Would be 8 o'clock your time in LA. But the program comes in every Saturday, and many a times I would be interviewing somebody, as you already know, who is in the educational setting. Could be somebody who is lecturing in the university, and this would be our Gambian brothers and sisters. However, I have had opportunities of inviting people from universities who don't have anything to do with us, which come in and share information about what needs to be done as you prepare your child for college. Just like you said, things that are fundamental, and I know we're about to wrap up, but knowing the deadlines for applications to universities, making visits to university campuses, not just one, but also making sure you keep that communication available where universities have access to your child's education, which is a great. And then you know that if your child wants to take a particular area of study of what they're interested in, just communicate with them and ask them to solidify why they think that's something that they want to pursue. And then support them. You make sure you provide them with all the information. Make that visit to the university and see if the child would connect with that institution. Many a times when the school has your child's information in their data, trust me, MB, before they graduate, like in 11th grade, you will start getting letters coming from the university soliciting your membership or having your child enrolled with that school. But you don't have that stuff going on where you have yourself busy, as our Gambians like you said. People don't want to discuss what they're going through. They don't want to talk about it. And I wanted to allude into the issue of disabilities. Disabilities, in my mind, are sometimes, in many ways, challenges that are temporary. And I've mentioned this. You have people like Albert Einstein. These were dyslexic people who couldn't even talk, who couldn't read very well. They became some of the most successful brains that we've ever known. You talk about Richard, I think it's Richard Branson, the guy who owns Virgin Atlantic. I may be pronouncing the name wrong. These are people who are dyslexic. But look at how successful they've ended up being. Our problem in our country is, in the Gambia, when somebody has a physical challenge, we think they're marginalized. This kid is no good. They're bad people. And I think that plays into the reason why we're backward as a continent. Because some of these people could have been our brightest brains. But we take them, we marginalize them, they pass away, and we move on. We think somebody has to be perfect. And they're never always perfect when they're born. They go through changes. People give them the support that they need, such as special speech therapies, special needs care, and they become morphed into some of the brightest students and kids we will have. We've had United States presidents who were affected in their childhood. Couldn't see, maybe couldn't talk well, reserved people who don't want to be out there in the open. But they had all the training, and they became some of the brightest people on earth.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Badjie. Obviously, that's very important, the involvement of, parents in their kids' life at school. Just in my case, a very, quick short story. My son, at a very young age in school, would sit, he was seated kind of in the middle or the back of the class, and he was struggling with his grades, and we just couldn't understand what was going on. And once the teacher really brought him closer, it started observing him and realized that he was really having trouble seeing the board that writing on, and which prompted us to, obviously, finally get him eyeglasses. On the whole, this poor kid was going to school, had some issues with his eyes, but I had totally spaced out that he had eye surgery, right after birth, because they needed to work on his eyes. And those are some of the little things that, once you talk to the kids and you see that grade is not going up, you start really asking questions and working with the teacher. If it wasn't for that teacher, we would not have known. And in most cases, your child is not doing well. They hit that age of 17, 18, then you start looking for a job for them, and they become this, the average workforce out there. But, just to mention that you said we were towards the end. You obviously know that I can't let you go without talking a little politics. I hope you have a little bit of time to talk about some of our political issues a little bit. Do you have another half an hour or so?
Absolutely, I do have time. Let me touch on what you just mentioned. Many a times I've told this in my program. I have a parent whose kid I've been tutoring, and mashallah, never went to school in Senegal, came over here, we put her in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. And she struggled, but we had given her all the support. She's now almost a straight A student. She's gotten honor roll status for the past 2.5 years. But it just turned out, when I go tutor her most of the time, she'll look at a piece of paper and she'll always have struggle. She'll struggle kind of reading some of these things. But because of the exposure that I have had in the school setting, and the training sometimes that some of these organizations come and offer us, to look for signs like you just mentioned with your son, that if a child is struggling to read and they don't have that interest in the school setting, there are underlying issues that they need to look into. And special needs come. They talk to the kid. They'll give them tests. And guess what? That's how they probably found out about your son not being motivated in being active in the class. If we don't figure these things out in the early stages, we have a problem. The fact that they can read it, that's quite a different settings when it comes to school. Sometimes it's hearing too, the Vaneka problem. So these are all challenges you have. It affects the kids. We need to really pay attention to those. But yeah, let's get into politics.
Thank you so much. I had a compliment. Somebody complimented me and said that you and I sounded alike. I'm like, man, if I sound, like this guy, it's probably the biggest compliment. You're making a lot of sense. Very poised, great conversation. I know educational stuff can get boring sometimes, but I really hope that our people will take the time to listen to your, show, because there's a lot we can learn. There's a whole lot, and there's nothing better than seeing that child of yours graduating with a master's, in law. Just recently, I went to a graduation of one of my friends over here, and I tell you, as a friend and as an uncle, I felt so proud to see that young second-generation Gambian graduating from USC with, a master's in law. And, the sky is not even the limit for this young lady. She's already doing really great, sitting at the bar, and that is a success story, and that is what every parent lives for. Obviously, we don't want to push our kids to do the things that they don't like, but there's nothing better than seeing your son really focus, heading towards excellence. With that said, Mr. Badjie, from teaching to politics,
yes,
we're going to have to talk about it. But life is politics, politics is life. You're from the Gambia just like me, 21 years of dictatorship. Right now, our country is almost at a standstill. The borders just got opened. The average person is struggling. The quality of education is bad. We have one of the most respectable senior citizens in jail in the name of lawyer Ousainou Darboe, illegally detained. The president has no sense of direction as to how to run our country. Tell us, in your take, what is the current situation in our country?
Thank you very much for asking the question. Like I mentioned, we can't talk about education, which is very important. You look at what happens in the United States here. Every time people are running for government, the things that they talk about is education, education, education. Quickly, good case in point. I just found out that in the 1940s, when World War II was up and going, many of the draftees that went to serve were men, as you know, but eventually what ended up happening is the teachers were left to teach. And this was the truth. They indicated that no teacher was going to be drafted. They needed the teachers to continue to teach the kids. We have that problem in our country. For 22 years now, my brother, we have a government which I believe have not invested enough in that educational settings to make sure that our children get the best possible education. And that's something we will have to deal with for years and years to come, because they don't have those skills. Somebody else is going to have to fill that void. But as far as the political situation, I think two things are happening here. We allowed somebody to become the head of state that did not have responsibility as a head of household. I think there was one flaw that we allowed to happen, because you know as much as I know, in your household there's always bills to pay, the food has to be on the table, you have to be able to manage the affairs of your family. If you don't have somebody who has that responsibility and you give them a country to run, that's disaster waiting to happen. That's one area. And then you have the issue of somebody just continually, circumventing the rules, changing the rules every once in a while, who has mastered the skills. And I have to be honest, he has mastered the skills. That's why he's been there for 21 years. He goes and circumvents things. But in my opinion, he has to have somebody who is more intelligent, knowledgeable than him, who is giving him the information he needs that he acts upon. He couldn't possibly do it on his own. And this is one thing we need to really come to terms with. Somebody is sitting there that's telling the president, Jammeh, that for us to get here, you need to do this, you need to do that. And he's paying that person a lot of money to do all of these things. So I am very remorseful, upset, and disappointed. And this is what I was telling some of my friends this past weekend. Allah gave us Kairaba, and we disappointed Kairaba. We embarrassed the old man and treated him as a non-entity, in my opinion. And he was put on the wayside for having done practically nothing. If you compare Jawara's regime with other African regimes there, you and I know that we had a democracy that was something that was admirable to many countries in the sub-region there. But at some point in time, people felt, okay, this is not working in our favor. Albeit, there were issues there. People knew there was corruption to some extent. But you want to compare that with what's going on in our country right now, people would say not. It was way much better. So, in my opinion, the fact that we've made all these mistakes and allowed somebody to be sitting there for all these years has become a cancer to our society. Not only does it affect you and I, my brother. If you go to Gambia now, I remember back in the days, I say this, my grandfather would have people traveling from Casamance coming into the city, the village area, and they'll just stop by during lunchtime, and they'll come in and casually would invite them to wash their hands and eat lunch with us, relax, take a nap. They get up in the evening. My grandfather would escort them to the middle of the village or outside the outskirts, and then they go. We don't even know who these people are. They could be having a communicable disease, but we trusted that we needed to take care of each other, that God would take care of us as long as we're taking care of people who are guests and visitors, wayfarers who were coming in. They'll eat with us, we'll eat, and we'll shake hands, and then they'll leave. In the past 15, 20 years, that has faded away. I remember going to Gambia, and the first thing my mom would tell me is, you don't want to eat in anybody else's house. When it's time for lunch, you come home and eat. That's where the fabric of our community, of society, has fallen to, my brother. Where people are not scared of taking women, and taking them into cells and abusing them and torturing them and killing people. And that has become the norm of our society. And that, in my opinion, is the punishment that I think we're getting as a result of the way we treated Sadara Jawara, who fought so hard, gave up everything for this country. And all we gave him was have a non-entity become a president of our country.
Thank you so much, Saul, for obviously touching on that. I think, I was talking with Karamba, and he described it very well, saying that, how, these security officers are such huge cowards that 4 of them or 10 of them will get into a room with a lady handcuffed, beating the person and trying to rape them. I think, and then coming out projecting themselves to be people with authority and power is probably the lowest the human soul can ever get to with some of our security officers. And I think, obviously, the state of our nation, it goes without saying that we've got a lot of healing to do as a nation But part of that healing also is we know if something like this were happening in societies like Senegal or in the United States here, part of, to me, the duty of leadership is to stand up, because you are that voice. When you become a leader, you're a leader of a community, of a group, of a political party. That means when you speak, you're speaking for a majority. Given that what is happening to these women, getting raped, getting beaten, a young lady getting beaten by 4 grown men, and we still see some of our political leaders, obviously Ousseynou came out and, demanded justice for some of these people. He also got arrested and illegally held right now. But we've seen some of our leaders, the imams, the political party leaders, unfortunately, the big elephants in the room, resorting to letter writings and stuff and refusing to get out. Some are arguing that, when they get out, they too will be arrested. But doesn't it get to a point where we know what is happening is wrong? There's no going about negotiating this thing. We almost have to deal with it with rage, and just to all the leaders have to just show, if it means for all of them to go, so that the international community can finally jump in and understand that we have, a mentally challenged individual at the helm. What is your take on these other leaders, the imams, the other political parties, that is still sitting there seeing a decent individual like Ousseynou, just like you said, we disappointed Sadauda, and here we are with this, and now there's a sense and a feeling out there that Ousseynou is also being disappointed.
I'm glad you mentioned this. I am going to separate these two leadership responsibilities in terms of politics. And I've said this before. I've called into the Fatu show to say, you know what, there should be some sense of outrage and disappointment that when Ousseynou was arrested, the opposition party was reluctant, or rather a little bit slow to react as a result of what happened to him. But I also mentioned that the fact that Jammeh and his administration was silent there for a couple of weeks, that there must have been some kind of arrangement that was taking place where the government was even given an ultimatum by either the EU or maybe the United States to say, okay, in order for us to be able to bring some normalcy or calm things down, you have to be quiet. But also there's probably a potential of saying your term is up. You cannot run for a re-election this coming year. We're going to work with the opposition and make sure that they hold their guns, that they don't react to what has happened with the arrest of Ousseynou Dabo. And in the meantime, we'll work out some way forward. I think I still hold that belief that chances are that's what it is. And I'm hopeful that that would happen. But I have seen some movement, at least in the case of Oje Jallow, that he's beginning to make that move to say we're not going to accept the status quo. Things have to change. So we'll still leave it at that, and I'm hoping that that will happen. But I think they've been a little bit relaxed in hoping that, going for election would be the change. Because, like we mentioned earlier, that they've set some administrative standards. They've set the security apparatus in such a way that you can't beat these leaders in terms of elections. It's always impossible. So that would be there, and we'll see how it all, fans out moving forward. And I hope it goes to the direction where I think you and I would agree that a coalition would be a good option. But then that comes to play. I mean, our African mentality is we don't want to give up leadership, and he'll say, we want you to be the forefront of what we're doing, although we see that in Senegal. And it's translating very well. People can say all they want about Senegal. I think they're moving in the right direction so quickly that they've turned the economy around. 30 years ago, Uncle Sidi would tell you that our economies have not even anywhere close to be comparable. But look at where they are today as a result of just a group of opposition leaders coming in and saying, we want you to lead for this many years, and then after that we'll talk about what happens next. And everybody signs on that, and it's a contract. In terms of the imams and the religious leaders, I think they've failed. And I'm honestly going to say this. Muslim scholars, the ones that I listened to, Dr. Ahmed Lo of Senegal, who is a doctorate in the religion, the faith of Islam, Dr. Ahmed Israr Ahmed of Pakistan. He passed away a few years ago. They've talked about the decay in leadership in the Islamic faith. When that decay happens, the leaders in the Islamic faith would either look the other way, ignore all the bad things that are happening, or connive with the people that are doing the bad and marginalize the innocent people. And I think that's the status that we are in our country. I don't think anyone should give those religious leaders any respect because they have failed Allah and they have failed the Muslim faith and they have failed their country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bagi. Very well said, very professional at it. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's a simple, we just got to call it spade a spade. They have failed us. Our leaders have failed us, but there's still time for them to obviously redeem themselves and do the right thing. Mr. Badjie, let's assume for a minute that you do have Khalifa in audience with OJ, Mai Fati, and all those other political leaders there, in your audience, and you're speaking to them. The importance of not only stepping up and doing the right thing, but it is time for them to get up and, act with anger and show their frustration openly to the Gambian people, because we've seen last month where the women and the Gambian people have really gotten out there, demonstrated, shown that they're tired of this regime after 21 years, and the regime turns around, sprays bullets on them, killing people, arresting a majority of them, and raping some of these women. These leaders still don't find a reason to really get out there, and especially my take on Khalifa as an individual is this is someone who openly attacks her daughter, was very proud of it and still talks about it, and people still talk about it, how he openly challenged this guy. But here we have a dictator, and he's not even calling this person by the name and dancing around. They're your audience right now. Can you speak to them and tell them how important it is for them really to, step up for a change and be the leaders that they always wanted, to be, because they've been busy trying to, solicit for our votes, our donations, wanting to be the next leaders of that country. But obviously, the test of times they've really failed, and it is time that we speak to them as ordinary citizens. Can you talk to these people and tell them the importance of really stepping up to the plate?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question. I think my message to Khalifa Saleh particularly would be, just like you mentioned, granted, like I said, I worked in the civil service. We've always monitored activities by some of these opposition parties just to know what their pulse is, not that necessarily intimidating them. But I mean, when they had rallies and stuff, we'll have agencies go in there and just kind of get a feel of what they're doing, not necessarily reporting that information to benefit the ruling government, but just to have records of information that with the fact that some of these opposition parties may end up becoming voices of change using arms or uprising or demonstrating or doing all kinds of activities. And absent of that, they were fine. I mean, so Khalifa Saleh, like you said, was probably one of the most feared by the PPP regime, because OJ had mentioned that when they were having meetings and talking, and Khalifa Saleh and his team get there, they just say, "Oh, that's how much strength they had. They had the freedom to do anything they wanted, as far as it was within the law. And it baffles me, it frustrates me that after all these years that he's been fighting for change to make sure that we have a country that has some of the things that he believed, perhaps advocated for, that he's allowed this situation to fester, that he wouldn't even mention Jammeh's name. But they like to report these in the papers. And my thing is, it's complicated for Khalifa to be writing these articles and make it so complicated for the simple layman to actually digest that information. That's not what I would expect. These are all my opinions. Again, too, when we have the situation with Ousainou Darboe, and everybody just sitting on the wayside, whatever it is that they might have agreed upon as a result of being calm and cool, the moment the information comes out that women have been tortured, Solo Sandeng was killed, I think there would have been what would break the camel's back, that they would say, forget about all of this. We're going to go out on the street and demand for change by releasing our opposition leader, by making sure that Ousainou Darboe is out. Because they don't do that, then you and I will continue to challenge their leadership skills. And I think that's a problem. So my message to them would be, Think about the situation that your country is in 21 years on. Education is fundamentally flawed. Everything is at a standstill, so to speak. The kids are not graduating. They're not being taught the right way. Where would those kids be tomorrow? When you get older, who would be running the affairs of your country? Think about the health sector and how difficult it is for families to actually have medical assistance. They don't have the funding. People would die. Who are these people that are being affected? Are these potential leaders of our country? Okay, think about trade, the economy, and how it's affecting the daily livelihoods of people. Who is responsible for that? The government of Yahya Jammeh. So OJ, Ousainou Darboe, Halifa Sallah, and all of these opposition leaders, my message to you would be, form that coalition, pick somebody that you want to lead, because what is important is for the good of your nation. So that tomorrow, the children who are going to be growing up will say, there was wrong in this country. The leaders of the opposition leaders came together. They fought that wrong. They picked a leader. He won the election, turned things around for the good of our nation. And we need to live up to that challenge and make sure we run the affairs of our country along those lines. And you should be able to come together and make one voice statement. That is, Yahya Jammeh, the country gave you the ability to run the affairs of this country, of their nation, and their affairs. For 21 years, you have failed. You have not delivered. We're here to tell you that we want to take over and we will deliver to the people of our country, because you have not delivered. You have not delivered in all of these sectors, not the economy, not in health, not in education, the security setup. Everything is completely at a standstill. We want to change things. We're not. Look at what's going on right now in our country, in our sub-region. There is what I call geopolitical schizophrenia, which means Yahya Jammeh is scared. Yahya Jammeh is not stable. He says things that we all know are false, are wrong, they're incorrect, statements that no head of state would ever make in the history, as far as you and I know, standing in front of a podium in an open mic and insulting our elders, insulting our women, insulting leaders in different countries, saying all kinds of derogatory statements against the Mandingos, the Wolofs, our women. I mean, who would accept that as the status quo of your country? Stand up, rise up, and do like Ousainou Darboe did. If this is going to mean for you to pass away for the good of your country, so be it. You will only die one time, and stop accusing us of being the people that are festering change. Because, my brother, you and I know, and this is very, very important to me, and sometimes I can be very emotional. You look at what you earn here in the United States and how you always split your income between your family here and in Gambia. And in many cases, you would rather have your kids deprived of some of the things that they would need here because you wanted to help your family back home. Can anyone tell us that we hate our country? If we have been doing this for years, regardless of what the status quo is, we still want to help our families. Can anyone tell us that we don't love our country? And look at the fact that we don't have the ability to vote. Why can't we be allowed to participate in the electoral process? If we are contributing a huge chunk of the economic activity that's going on in that country through remittances, why shouldn't we have a voice, just like the Senegalese people here and other countries who have a voice that can vote in the electoral process? We don't have all of those, so we're telling you, rise up and challenge the status quo, because trust me, the military will not come at you. We've been hearing information about the fact that when you rise up and stand in the streets demanding for change, nobody is going to be there supporting Yahya Jammeh. They're tired, they're scared, those military officers. Every single one of them has been marginalized. They don't know if they would be their last meal, because Yahya is a sick man, he's mentally ill, that he could come in and turn around and attack you or pick you up, and you will never see the light of day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Badjie. That was eloquent, well stated. The Gambian people are not asking for much. What we want is peace, democracy, fair justice system, a government that will protect its people, build our nation to better our people. This is not much to ask. We don't want a government that rapes our women. We don't want governments that torture our people. We want a government that is responsible. We want a government that will protect the people, create wealth for the people, create jobs, be able to put in laws into place that will protect the Gambian people. All we're asking for is a sensible government in place. It comes with a responsibility, an ethical responsibility that every Gambian has. Everything, we've talked about the leaders, we've talked about the responsibilities. There's also a part of responsibility that the Gambian people as ordinary citizens have. You've got them in audience. Speak to the Gambian people. Let them understand what their role is here, or what do you think their role is and how to go about it, to be able to motivate and push these leaders so that we can finally get our voices heard and so that common sense will prevail in our country and get rid of the dictatorship.
You know, Brother MB, there are things, many of us from home that are of the faith of Islam always have this feeling that Yala Mokofa take Yala Mokofa Ajini. That will always have to happen. And I'm glad you asked this question because, again, I'm going to quote the teachings that I have listened to from Dr. Ahmed Lowe, who is from our sub-region. He says he understands the culture, understands how we think. And in many of his sermons, he has mentioned that if people always think that they can sit down and expect Allah to come and do things for you, then we will be waiting for a long time. Although He will do it, but we will be waiting for a long time. We all know that Allah has laws, and those laws have by and large been very steady. For instance, the Prophet, God could have held the hands of all of His enemies and changed everything. But they had to go through difficult times to make sure that those changes come to place. And each time He would tell him, you will succeed. Allah will say to the Prophet, you will succeed, Prophet, you will succeed one day. But he had to go through that metamorphosis of change, of trying to train and teach the people. There were different stages that the faith of Islam had to take, to the extent that people really had to buy into it. You look at the affairs of Gambia right now. For our people to sit there after 21 years and say, we're going to sit around and wait until the change comes, instead of saying, you know what, we want the change here and now because we've given enough of our time for 21 years and that change hasn't come fast. We need the change. If they sit down and expect that God is going to come to their aid, first of all, what is happening in that country is so much of a mess that I think we're being punished. But people need to realize that if you're having difficulty feeding your family today, it's not MB's responsibility that they're affecting it. It's the government's responsibility, Brother MB. The government's responsibility, which I'm going to touch into this very quickly, is the government should have made sure that they invested in the agricultural sector. They haven't done that. Food subsidies and commodities are expensive because we're not producing pretty much anything. Our tourism industry has been affected because we go out there and we say things that affect other communities, other demographics, that they don't feel comfortable coming to our country. These are the bread and butter that we've been using to rouse up, to kind of spur up our economy. You shut down all of those activities, you're left with nothing, and the people are suffering. People are going to bed with no food, and the leader of the country should be the one responsible of saying, I need to do better. And if they can't do better, it's time to hand them the pink slip and say, your time is up, the game is up, we don't need you anymore. We gave you all of the opportunities that anyone could give anyone. For 21 years, we're still hungry, even hungrier today. Are we better off today than we were yesterday? Maybe that should be a question that people should ask. I don't think families are better off today than they were yesterday, except for the ones that are actually within his inner circle. And that's not how you run an economy. So, quickly, let's take, for instance, the $900 million that is circulating, that it's been in the Panama Papers that Jammeh took. Let's say we take a quarter of that, 900 million. So we take 225 million of that money. And Jammeh said the 225 million, I am going to use half of that money. Okay, it would be 112 million 500 of that money. And I'm going to build one of the best hospitals in Gambia. Some of the things that we enjoy as a country is we are the smallest population, the smallest country on that island, where $100,000, $1 million can go a long way, Brother MB, compared to Senegal or Nigeria. If Jammeh said, I'm going to spend 112 $112,500,000 of that money in building a state-of-the-art hospital in the city of Banjul. Build another one in Bansang. Build another hospital in Basse. Split the remaining $112,500,000 into two, okay? And build some of the best hospitals in that country. Invest in bringing in the brightest people to come from the United States or anywhere. We have the best weather condition in our country. Come here, help work in our hospital settings. Let's work with organizations like Kaiser Permanente, which you already know is one of the largest medical, insurance companies in the United States. Let's work with the medical sector of Kaiser Permanente. Let's use their low technology, something that is used 5 years ago, to spur up our medical system in the country. Bring in the brains to come in and work, and have our young men graduate from the university, go in and do residency, and become some of the brightest, and work in that hospital. Then we take another chunk of that money. You don't have to take half of that, a little bit of that money, and invest in irrigation settings in the whole entire route of the corridor of the River Gambia, and engage farmers in agriculture. Those are two keys to things that could actually spur up the economy. Yaya didn't do that. He took that money and put it in an offshore account. That should tell people that it's time for him to go. We don't need that. We need change, and change is here and now. You can't wait another day, because you delay the gratification. Not only are you affecting your country, every single day you wait, it'll take years and years and years to bring the economy back to the standing that we expect it to be.
Yeah. So you and I can go up, on this conversation for the longest. I know that it's been about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours into this. It is late in your neck of the woods. I know that before we started this, your kids were just doing their homework. Obviously, I would definitely have to invite you back. This is a very, very, very fruitful conversation. This is the essence of what I'm trying to capture. Listening to somebody like you clearly displays that if somebody like you were used effectively by our nation, there's a lot of good that you can do. University students, high school students coming out of these schools, and they can barely write sentences. We see the evidence on social media. The state of our nation is abysmal. We're heading in the wrong direction. We're just becoming a lost nation. And if any Gambian is out there who is not concerned and refusing to join this fight, you obviously need to check yourself again, because as you clearly indicated, there's a lot of challenges that we're faced with as a nation. And it goes without saying the need for each and every one of us to participate. But thank you so much for coming to the conversation, for accepting our invite. One last question, and obviously, you can also chime in on whatever you wanted to talk about before we close. We have seen our women folks taking the lead against this dictatorship in the last month or so. Jammeh has done a very good job in assaulting the Gambian male, try to separate us from our women, saying that he is a president for the women, but then the women folks are also seeing how he's abusing their husbands, their wives, their husbands, their brothers, and their uncles and fathers. I want you to talk to that women folks, because I think we also need to reach out to them, for them to understand that Jammeh has no interest in serving them. He's actually using them to pit them against the male population. But the women population have also done an excellent job. They need to be commended. And I only wish that we had more men and leaders acting like them. Can you talk to that segment of our population, not only to thank them for the bravery that they did in stepping out and taking bullets and a beating and many getting raped right now, but to show them the importance of continuing this fight, and also not to listen to Jammeh when he says that he's the president of the women?
It's all politics, MB, and I think our women know better. Okay, the majority of the women in the Gambia know better that back before Yaya Jammeh became president, they were involved in all kinds of kafolu, like you say in Mandingo. The women folks will do ususu. They'll do sales. Many of them have never been into a school setting, but they know the business system in and out, small business, that they'll make something and go out in the street and sell it and make money. take a little bit of that, help their husbands with the first money, come back and take care of their family. So for Yaya to actually marginalize the families by insulting the men and saying that, you and I know, my father paid for my school. It wasn't my mom, although she was responsible for taking care of other things. She was a saleswoman. She would, she would make muro sauce, muro liba, and so take it to the police station and sell it to small young police officers for breakfast. And then she'll come back and make what you would call wanjo, back when they were in Mansakonko. Have a suruga, a guy who was a maid who would come in and lift those 2 boxes that are, those ice boxes, and take them to Ilatanda at Farafenye and sell that and bring the money back home. My mother would sit at home and manage all of the affairs of all of that without my dad having to be involved in anything, never sat down to do any calculation for her. She managed her money. She made money. She bought sheep, She bought goats and sent them to her father in Busra to manage the affairs of those livestock that she had. They know how to do this stuff, so they're not stupid for Yaya to sit down and think and tell them that it's now that you guys have everything going for you versus back in the days. We all know that, Brother MB. Our mothers, many of them, will buy us our uniforms. They'll give us our lunch money. But our fathers had their role as the head of household. They were there to manage the affairs of how we behave. They would discipline us. They would counsel us. So for somebody to come in and tell you that I am your best friend, but he turns around in the middle of the night, sends plainclothes officers to pick up your husbands and your children from your house and take them, and they never come back. Or maybe sometimes your children get so marginalized that they take the back way and they end up dying in the desert. Nobody should tell you that that person has your interests at heart. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. If what he's doing for his daughter, Mariam here in the United States, is what he's doing for every single child in the Gambia, we wouldn't be talking about the problems that we're facing. That means take all of that money that's stolen, invest it in the education of our children. Our mothers would be better off today than they were 21 years ago. But they were better off, in my opinion, during the Jawara regime than they are now, because they had the freedom to express themselves. They had the freedom to do whatever they wanted. Their children had the freedom to do whatever they wanted. The husbands had the freedom to venture into any job. If your husband was working for Yaya Jammeh today and they lost their job, they've been cut off from society. Nobody wants to touch them. It's like it's taboo that you have any affair with Yaya, with any of those people that were arrested or maybe had problems with Yaya Jammeh. You would be the next target. Can you tell me that that's a better situation right now than it was 30 years, 20 years, 25 years ago? I guess not. So women, folks, thank you for standing up. I think you guys are playing a role that, goes without saying. That sometimes it embarrasses me to talk about that. I think about my mother, my sisters, my daughters. Would somebody be so callous and reckless that they would arrest a woman, bring him into some dark room, and undress them and torture them and touch them, and they claim to be Muslims? I think that is the lowest end that a society would take itself to.
Thank you so much, Mr. Badjie. This is the essence of the conversation. For the people out there to understand, there's still decent Gambians that understand how to talk professionally, Gambians that can look at a problem and try to solve it rather than what we have back home right now. And the people need to have faith in the Gambian people that we can get rid of this dictatorship. And when we get rid of this dictatorship, we have decent citizens out there, learned citizens that are capable of listening to the Gambian people and bring about the necessary change that is needed in their country. Thank you so much for coming to the conversation. It is an honor speaking with you. I will have to invite you. I know I say that all the time. There's a lot of people to speak to out there, but I really want to do a serious educational one with you. I thought the educational part was much more informative, but this political discussion that we have, I have to say, each and every one of these experiences that I'm having with Gambians is an educational experience where I'm learning a lot. It gives me a better understanding of what the Gambian is made of. We sometimes tend to doubt ourselves, saying, what if Jammeh leaves? My simple answer to them was, that's what we said when Saadata was there, and this is what we end up with. There's better people, much more better leaders out there that can definitely take our country to the Third Republic, not insinuating that you are, I am, or anyone is, but that this is the few that we're talking out of the pool of millions. And the Gambian people need to understand that it is our responsibility, a moral obligation, a duty of every citizen, no matter where you are, to speak up and fight against dictatorship, because it is wrong for us to sit, listen to our sisters being raped, listen to 4 grown men locking a woman in a room, beating them, an older person hitting on the behind of a woman, Jammeh going around on tour, not talking about national issues, the challenges our nation is faced with, but talking about spelling and how to spell silly words that the average human being cannot even comprehend. But this is the state of our nation right now, and this is why we're continuing this conversation. Thank you so much. If you have any last words, it's an honor speaking with you. And like I said, we can keep on, but everything must come to an end. If you have any last words, and we'll go ahead and close this conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Brother MB, for allowing me to come to the conversation, which like I said, I've listened to interviews that you've had with talented young men and women in the diaspora. And, my message to the Gambian people and all of our listeners is we don't have a conversation in Gambia like we do now. There's a vacuum there. And so we're feeling that void. We're not enemies of our country. Many of us, as you know, have served our country very well. Some of them are still back home serving their country well. They have never been involved in any of the affairs that we're talking about as being the problems that are festering in our country. And also, they're hardworking people. They love their country, and they would do it again and again for the good of our nation. To those, we say thank you for serving our country the right way and doing it for the interest of the public, not just your own interest. When it comes to two things that I think we need to pay attention to as a continent of Africa, if we don't pay attention to education, we don't pay attention to our health, or failed, we would be failing and we will continue to fail. These are 2 key things that we need to pay attention to. For our economy to be vibrant and developed, we need to make sure people have food to put in their stomachs. That means they can think logically, but also people are healthy. You create those 2 environments, you put that on top of which would be security, okay? And you have all those things going along with agriculture, making sure you invest in those sectors. Our economy would grow. We have so much potential in our country, but it's been marginalized because one person thinks that they're the only person that can make decisions that will affect our affairs every day, and people should reject that. But in ending, if I have offended anybody as a Muslim, my apologies. If I have said anything that is contrary to what Allah has said, I am asking Him to forgive me and to forgive you, Brother MB, because we will always make mistakes. We're not perfect. But when we make mistakes, whether we know it or not, we can always ask for God's forgiveness. And I'm praying that Gambia becomes the country that we would advocate for in the very near future with the help of Allah, because without Him, nothing is possible, and with Him, everything is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Saul Bagi. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Saul Bagi, a master in public relations, a current teacher in Detroit, obviously emphasizing and helping minorities and troubled kids from kindergarten to grade 6. A great conversation. We'll definitely have to bring Saul back again. Thank you, and good night from Los Angeles.
Thank you very much, my brother. Take care.
Jammeh and Co. wala ni ke basu kunderi ya dawo habibu na denda fanna jama de dawo wala din ko da de
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been 21 years of tyranny oppression in our nation. What began in 1994, when some irresponsible soldiers decided to take the law into their own hands and overthrow a democratically elected government under Sadauda. It was not a perfect regime. The PPP was not. Sadauda was not a perfect leader. But one thing we can all attest to, he was a leader, a compassionate individual, someone who respected human rights. There was corruption, yes. Like every nation, we had our challenges. But it wasn't a nation where people would disappear, get tortured and raped, like we're experiencing in the Jammeh regime right now. The Sadauda regime respected human rights. There was a rule of law, a justice system that we all respected. But today we live in a nation where people get raped, tortured, under the cover of darkness. It is our responsibility as Gambian people to rise up and stop the abuse before history judges us wrong. Gambian people, we must rise up against the dictatorship in our country. To the leaders that are quiet, the imams, the political leaders that have left Dabo languishing in jail and refused to take a stand, you have disappointed the Gambian people. But there's still hope and time on your side to rise up and join the Gambian people and say enough of this madness, the dictatorship in our country. Thank you.